Welcome to the Chosen Podcast with Dr. Ashley. Real women, real issues, real conversations.
All right, y'all. So you know at the beginning of the episode, I like to start with my oil of the day. Today is all about myrrh because today I'm going to share with you some backstory about my upcoming book called Chosen, Jewels from Queen Esther's Crown. Now, y'all know I love a crown, honey, and I love some sparkle. But I realized the story of Esther is so much deeper than just the crown or the beauty contest. So let me take some deep breaths to this myrrh and we're going to get started. All right. So I have to say, and you'll read this when you read the book that is dropping like right now. Like when you see this episode, you should be able to go to Amazon and buy that thing, okay? But you'll read in the foreword, or not the foreword, the introduction, that this book took me over a decade to write. And not that I was writing for 13 years. Nope, I was fighting for 13 years. Back in, I guess, 2013 or 2012, 2013, I did a group study on the Book of Esther, Beth Moore's study, to be exact. It's hard being a woman. Shout out to Beth Moore for your amazing work. I did this study with my girlfriends, and I felt this tug on me. Like, I had so much to say about it. I felt so connected to it. And granted, you know, at that time, so what, I'm 42 now, so I was in my early 30s, maybe late 20s, actually, probably like 29-ish. And it meant a lot to me. But I was scared to death, okay? I just, you know, kind of like Moses was telling God all the reasons why I was not the right person to write this book. That I didn't have enough to say, I didn't have the theological education, that I was nobody's minister. You see that, I wrote that in the introduction. I ain't nobody's minister. I'm just out here loving Jesus and trying to understand the Bible, okay? So I fought for a long time, but I kept, for whatever reason, coming back to Esther. I completed Beth Moore's study 3 times in total, and I would just go back to my notes, and I was so enthralled with this book of the Bible, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this, and I loved the things that Beth Moore brought forth, and then I would think that, and then I'd think something else, and it was just like I was living in the time of Esther and King Xerxes, and all these things I was wondering about in my mind. But I was scared to write them down. And I was scared to share them with anybody. So I did it for a decade, okay? And then at some point of 2022, going into 23 going into 24, I said, okay, I'm going to share some things on Facebook, because I had, at the beginning of that year, really felt inspired by Esther again. So I got into the Bible app. I started reading a couple of different, the studies that are just 3 or 4 days long. I read a few of those, and then I just started reading the book and shared a few of my thoughts and musings on my Facebook page, and they were getting shared. And then people were inboxing me like, would you care to lead a study on Esther with the women at my church? And I was like, I was terrified all over again. And so all of that, like, negative self-talk, all of that, you are not enough, you are not good enough, you are not in the right, like, this is not for you to do. Like, all of those things kept coming to me. And I just was scared. And so I finally said, God, if this is of you, and this is really what you want me to do, because you're not leaving me alone about it, I will do it. I submit. And from that moment, I will tell you, all hell broke loose, okay? I feel like so many things happened that were distractors that made me not able to focus. And I started to realize, like, oh no, this is the enemy. Like, I'm really supposed to be doing this. And the enemy's like, oh no, she finally said yes. Let me get her. So I felt like under attack, like not only just me, but like the people around me were going through things, major surgeries, like deaths, like all sorts of things were happening. But I kept saying every day, I'm going to write. I'm going to write. I'm going to stay committed. I'm going to write. I promise God, I submitted. I'm doing this. And so I would write in chunks, like, okay, an hour here, an hour there. And eventually, I got a draft. And I have to say that at the beginning of the year I was drafting the text, I was connected to Janan Sarwar with Global Bookshelves. Shout out to Janan and the Global Bookshelves family for holding me down and getting me to the finish line. But we made that connection, and for some reason, we were not able to connect, like we couldn't get a time on the schedule that worked for both of us. And, in retrospect, I realized it wasn't time. I wasn't ready yet, and I wasn't ready to put the work in that it was going to take to get us to this professional, beautiful, published copy that we have now today. So I continued writing, though, and I kept writing. I had this draft. So then I reached back out to Janan and was like, hey, Janan, I have a draft. And we talked, and the energy was just so incredible because I self-published a book before. Now going through this process that I've gone through, I realized I had no idea what I was doing, y'all. Like, I just was out here clicking stuff, like coming up with things. I had no idea what I was doing, but it was time and I was ready, and the conversation we had just really solidified in my spirit that this is the path that I needed to go with, and this is the person that God ordained to guide me. And so we talked and we created a plan, and I was honest. I was like, Janan, I need this one publishing package right here. I know that's what I need with the marketing and all the things, but hey dog, I ain't got it. Like, what are our options here? And they worked with me, and I count that whole group over there as like sisters, because the way they have helped me grow as an author, it's unmatched. And I'm going to make it through this episode without crying. So it was time. It was time for it to happen. And the more I read through my draft and was able to add more context and things that I was experiencing at the time that were challenging me, my seasons of beauty treatments that I was ready to be done with, the way, I had just grown and developed as a woman, I realized that although the no back in 2012, 2013, I thought was my doing, it was divine, because I wouldn't have the same context to this book of the Bible now. I wouldn't have that context then that I have now. So, why Esther? Obviously, like I said, I've always loved this story. I love the story of the rags to riches girl winning a beauty contest to become queen of the greatest land at the time, right? I'm a certified card-carrying pageant girl. Of course I love this story. But as I got older, I realized that we read Esther entirely too fast. Yeah, it's 10 chapters in the book of the Bible. Some of those characters, you don't hear about them anymore. But there's so much to learn beneath the surface. And I kind of felt that. My 29-year-old self felt that. But writing that book as a 40 and 41-year-old woman, I saw it so much differently. So I want to share a few things with you about the book that you might not expect. So first and foremost, I gave Queen Vashti the entire first chapter. And I did that because the more I read the study, and when you spend 2 years in 10 chapters of the Bible, you get really connected to the details, right? You start paying attention to stuff that you don't see in first read. And I find that 99.9% of the time that people talk about the book of Esther, they never mention Queen Vashti. Never talk about her. And what I spent the time talking about her because we can learn so much from her character. We learn about boundaries, which I talk about all the time, right? We learn that it's more important to be valued and respected and loved genuinely than to be stuck in a relationship just for the optics. Okay? Vashti teaches us the importance of no, period. Okay, like the Bible tells us she refused to go see King Xerxes in just nothing but her crowd. Said she refused. There was no begging, there was no pleading, there was no crying, there's no I'm sorry. She said no. And I think as women, we can just learn so much from that. A lot of times, and I've done it myself, have been quiet and just gone along just to get along and found myself in a relationship 7-9 years later, like, how did I get here? Who are you? It's because you start saying yes to the little things that are not in alignment with your values, and you turn around having to say yes to bigger and bigger and bigger things until you look yourself in the mirror one day and don't know who you are. So Queen Vashti, she's a goat. She's so brave, right? She's what this whole podcast name is about. She's bold. She kept balance. Like she realized, like, okay, am I gonna do this and sacrifice any kind of, ego or any kind of like self-worth that I have? Or am I gonna say no and risk my life or risk my title and risk all the things that, society says is important? She said no. So I spend this whole chapter on her, just breaking down the lessons that we learned from her. And also just the fact that her purpose was to be in that crown, wearing that crown, for a season. She wasn't supposed to be the queen when the Jews were going to be up for annihilation. You see? So had Vashti gone against what her spirit told her, we may not have a book of Esther. The Jews may have been annihilated. We never know. So I really want you to get familiar with Vashti. I want you to get deep with her and her story and what she did and how it really sets up a situation for Esther to rise. The next thing that I spend a lot of time on talking about in the book is Esther's perseverance. Okay, so we know that she was this orphan child. We don't know what happened to her parents. We know she was taken in by Mordecai, who apparently did a great job raising her. But we know that she's basically dropped off to this palace beauty contest and left to fend for herself. And while at first look, we're seeing, 6 months of beauty treatments with myrrh, shout out to the myrrh, 6 months of oils and spices and having all the best of the foods and having eunuchs and ladies' maids to care for you, that probably sounds for the busy woman like an incredible break, right? I think, could I have a year of being pampered? Of course, that sounds amazing. But what we often don't think about, and I really just kind of went down the rabbit hole with this, is what was the environment like in that harem every day with all of these women, girls, who had come forth or been taken to this place in order to give up what was their most prized possession at this, in this time, like being pure and chaste was a woman's value, right? So you're coming to the palace not knowing if you'll be the one chosen. There's no telling. We never learn how many girls actually showed up. There could have been hundreds, there could have been thousands, but you're coming willing to give up your most prized possession for the potential of being 1 in a million, right? So if you don't get selected, what does that mean for you? You're not going back home to your family to be, wed in the traditional sense. No one wants you now. You've been had, right? You probably might end up in the concubine side of the harem. That's fun. Not. So I want you to think about the intensity, the anxiety, the stress, the cattiness that probably existed there, especially when you see someone like Esther coming in and the eunuch's like, oh, she's found favor. So now I'm giving her extra ladies' maids and better food. You probably hate this girl. So I really like to spend some time thinking about everything else that was going on in the harem in addition to the beauty treatments, because I can't imagine that being an easy thing to endure, and endure it gracefully, right? And then you think on the other side of the harem, the side with the concubines, where ladies went after they had their night with the king. Can you imagine what that felt like? To know that you've just given yourself up for maybe just one lackluster night. And who knows if he'll ever call you again, if you're just stuck here to be a concubine and that's it for your life, right? There's a lot at stake for these ladies in the harem. So I really kind of went deep into that, just curious, like, yeah, it feels good to be relaxed and pampered, but oh my gosh, being with hundreds of thousands of women who are also doing the same thing after that one crown, that's intense. So I want you to think about that when you read Esther again and not just gloss past, all the things that could be happening beneath the surface. And then Vashti, we already talked about that, cut. And then there's Brother Mordecai, okay? I think a lot of times people read Esther, or they just talk about Esther, and it's like, for such a time as this, for such a time as this, but who said it? Do you know who said it? And Mordecai is the real MVP of this entire book of the Bible, because if it weren't for his obedience to take Esther in, to raise her the way that he was raising her, if he wasn't so deeply intentional about his faith, where, he even gets on Haman's bad side in the first place, none of these things, come to fruition. Mordecai also took Esther to the beauty contest, but he also kind of managed what she was doing from the outside, checking in, how's she doing, what's going on, and told her to conceal her heritage, because there would come a time. So Mordecai is wise. He's devoted. Even in the time when Haman's directive was out there, the decree that said they were going to be annihilated on this certain day, he mourned, yes, but he fasted and prayed and requested Esther and told her what to do. So I always ask, and you'll see this in my dedication. I dedicate this book to my 3 Mordecais, my three women in my life who might be behind the scenes in a lot of ways, may have walked before me. But if it weren't for them, I would not be before you as the woman that I am. And that's my mother, Miss Carmen, who taught me so much without even saying words, just through her actions, being able to be as strong as she was to raise us the way she did, with the resources that she had, is a remarkable human being. And my grandmother, Trisha Ann, who I love dearly, who taught me so many things also by doing it, taught me about like unconditional love, about putting your best face forward. She was big on not going outside and no house shoes and bonnets. You never know who you're going to run into. She really gave me my style streak, I guess you could say. But always there, no matter what, always there and always present and willing to love, no matter how much she hurt. And then my bonus mom, Miss Denise, mommy, she actually got a hold of me when I was 19 and helped transition this little girl from 18th and Hill Street to the woman that you see that's comfortable in her own skin, that is articulate and can speak about things that I'm passionate about, even if it's completely against what everybody else thinks. She taught me to be bold and brave, and so many different things. And it's because of these women and so many more people. But those are I call them my three greats, my three Mordecais, like people that because they are, I am. And so I want to end this episode just by challenging you to read deeper when you read the book of Esther. I challenge you to sit back and think about who your Mordecais have been. Because they say behind every great man is a great woman, but I think behind every Queen Esther is a Mordecai. Who are your Mordecais? Give them their roses while you still can, if you can. And I just want to say to you that you walking in your purpose matters. It may not feel like a big purpose to you right now, but what you're doing or not doing sets someone up for their destiny, okay? How long are you gonna make them wait? Thank you again for joining me for this episode of Bold, Balanced, and Blessed. Here's your reminder: being bold is brave, but staying balanced is powerful, and no matter what is going on around you today, just know you are blessed. Thank you again for sitting here and listening to me, and I hope to see you next time.